The parking lot, or as it's been setting up here. Bob here gave me a call, so told me what it was about, and the reason why I really wanted to come into town and talk to him and speak with us is just how excited he was, how passionate he is. He's been traveling the country, he's trying to get the word out. I had to beg him. I said, usually my rule is, 90% content, 10% sales pitch, but I love to have 15% sales pitch tonight, guys. That's what he's going to talk about is so important. So, in 2008, he joined Research Down Syndrome as their founding president. Is that correct? Right. And before that, he spent about 25 years with Abbott Laboratory. So, this guy knows what he's talking about in terms of these kind of deals. So, take it away. Thank you for coming,
Sterling. Thanks, everyone. And just a reminder again that there's handouts to the presentation here. There's also a stack of two-pager, which is the grants that we just recently announced that we're funding this year. And there's also a little flyer that I threw together real quickly talking about our RDS Runners team, which is something we hope to grow by leaps and bounds as a good source of funding. So Sterling talked a little bit about content and pitch. I'm going to do both, obviously. I'm very interested in the science. That's my background. But I also hope to leave all of you convinced about the importance of this research, excited about the revolutionary aspect of it, and be ready to support in whatever way you can. Time, talent, treasure, that sort of a thing, to support what is really becoming some very exciting research that potentially could lead to some FDA-approved safe and effective therapies to improve cognition in Down syndrome. So just a little bit more about my background. I was asked, I have 5 children, and I was asked by somebody out in the parking lot, do I have a child with Down syndrome? I don't. I became involved because I had a good college friend who has 5 children as well, and their youngest child has Down syndrome. His name is young Daniel. The founder really is Dan Flatley, who's out in New Jersey. Okay, and about the time he and his wife had been involved with Down Syndrome Research and Treatment Foundation. His wife's an MD, by the way, and they had been involved with DSRTF, but they felt like we're leaving money on the table around the country to support the research. And they thought, okay, you West Coasters, you work out there, they're out on the East Coast, we'll start another foundation basically with the same mission as Down Syndrome Research and Treatment Foundation, but perhaps applying different business models, networking differently, with our networks of friends and business associates, and grow the pie, okay? Because I'll show you some numbers in a little bit that says that the pie is not very large for Down syndrome research generally, and not large for Down syndrome cognitive research, okay? So that's a bit of my background. As I said, I worked at Abbott Laboratories more on the diagnostic end, but my training, my graduate training at the University of Texas in Galveston, my doctorate's in genetics and cell biology, so I'm comfortable with the science. It's a PhD, not an MD. No MD questions, please, okay? I'll push you off on that, but you don't even want to try to answer those. 10 years ago when young Daniel Flatley was born, his mom was an MD, right? And it was her 5th child, had the young child, Daniel, in her bed, and she looked at him, give him all the hug and kiss like we all do with our all of our children. And she said to the nurse, I believe my child has Down syndrome. And they confirmed it, and she got a lot of very little information from the medical staff there, as we realize is a bit of a problem. But that's another point. But she thought to herself, and she talks about this in an article that was published in a magazine a couple years back. Well, okay, here's my Daniel, okay. There's obviously going to be issues like the heart problems, which can be fixed now. I don't know if any of you experienced that. There's certain tendencies to types of leukemia, but those are very, very treatable. All right, but she, asked the medical staff, what do we know about the cognitive difficulties associated with Down syndrome? And what you got back then, 9 years ago, was this kind of a thing, a shrug of the shoulders, because everybody considered this, trisomic 21 condition, genetic in origin, and what can you do about that? It's far too complex. And any scientist back then would tell you that, or any medical researcher. So about that time, Pat and Dan and other parents with sort of similar stories started casting about and trying to find out what is happening with research in this area across the United States and in the world. They actually hired a consultant company to kind of cast out and say, what research is being done? Is there possibilities with this research? Can we with enough money, excite researchers to go into this field? And the answers all came back positive. So DSRTF was formed back in 2006, I think, 2005 maybe, Down Syndrome Research and Treatment Foundation out in the Stanford area. Dan and Pat became involved, within a year or two after young Daniel was born, and they were both board members. But as I noted earlier, they really felt like, even with what DSRTF was raising, we needed more. We needed more, obviously. You need to get to the point like MS is at $40 million a year, cystic fibrosis, and those kind of numbers, and Down syndrome research was not there. So they decided to start another organization called Research Down Syndrome, and I'm the president of that. Excited to be the president of it, and honored that I'm able to be here with all of you and get you as excited about the research, because there's some amazing things going on that I hope you agree when I present it to you. So it's a nice informal setting here. If you have any questions at all, raise your hand and I can answer during the talk. We'll have time at the end too as well. So our mission is twofold, and I'll get into that in a second. We were 2009. I actually live in the north suburbs of Chicago. It was handy to come here, okay? And I'm going to Indianapolis on Thursday, so that's a nice little trip too. It seems like a lot of my trips around the country get bunched into right around this time frame because the summer is kind of slow, and then October there's a lot of people involved with their buddy walks and things, so it keeps getting pushed into the November time frame, and then early next year too as well. So our mission is twofold. It's awareness, like what we're doing here, but also raising dollars. So enhancing awareness of Down syndrome cognitive research. I was with a business professor yesterday. He has a young Sophie, who's I think 3 or 4 years old with Down syndrome, and he teaches MBA classes at Notre Dame, and he said, Bob, it's all about bonded rationality. It's an economic term that a business professor would use. But bounded rationality means whether it's parents or the general public, they've never considered this. Cognitive research, okay, research to understand origins of cognitive difficulty. It's not in their thought process. And you can imagine that it's not in the general public too. So part of what I'm about, our website's about, our brochure's about, all the information we provide is making people aware that the science is there and is starting to unlock some of the origins of where the cognitive difficulties arise from. Okay, so let's break that bounded rationality and get everybody to consider the real possibilities. I go to corporations and try to say the same thing to them, and I go to the corporations and say, you guys need to be first movers. You could be the first corporation to align yourself with something this fantastic. A really, really amazing set of research that could have true consequences for 400,000 people in the United States and millions worldwide. So let's break that bounded rationality amongst ourselves, the broader public, corporations as well. So, the real idea here is to expand and enhance life opportunities. Increased educational and employment opportunities. And a key point that I bring up at any meeting is you probably all know the connection between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease, and the fact that by the age of 40, all persons with Down syndrome are showing the pathologies in the brain, the plaques and tangles caused by A-beta peptide amyloid buildup. Buildup in the brain, these plaques and tangles are showing the signs of Alzheimer's disease. And I'll show an image of that as well. But we really like to speak to that in the broad terms because the research that we're supporting may help unlock some of the issues related with Alzheimer's disease as well. But the fact is that we feel very strongly that a lot of our research is directed at trying to minimize the impact of cognitive decline, earlier onset and greater frequency of cognitive decline in persons with Down syndrome. So we're funding scientific research that's directed towards understanding the origins of intellectual difficulties. And our final goal is the development of safe and effective FDA-approved pharmacological therapies to address cognitive difficulties associated with Down syndrome. I talk later, there's not going to be a cure. There's not going to be a super drug. Okay, I can imagine because there's 4 or 5 or 6 pathways that are opening up in terms of contributing to the to cognitive difficulty pathway. I could anticipate maybe 3 or 4 therapies that might be used in concert. Every person's going to react differently, I imagine, so different persons might respond differently to certain types of drugs. That's a little bit out in the future, but this is really what we're all about. imagine that there might be a drug, safe and effective, that would be available for the children and adults that could just boost their memory, okay? You know, improve their short-term, long-term memory, improve their ability to function in a school setting with math and reading and that side of things. So, and our approach here is applying grassroots to increase public awareness. Okay, we are very engaged with email messaging, and if somebody could start if you wouldn't mind, a little list, and I can get all your email addresses and pass it around so that I can add you to our do you all want to receive our regular newsletters? If you don't put your name on it. But we do a lot of email messaging. We've created some videos to educate and encourage the public to consider. I keep wanting to direct or to have produced a viral video, you know. But it usually has to be cats, I think, or politicians making a dumb move for things to go viral. So, but you know, I keep trying. And then regular messaging and cause campaigns on Facebook and that sort of a thing. So we're really trying to reach the broader public, but also educate parents as well about what we're about. And then we're very much involved with advocating Down syndrome cognitive research. We interact at a national level with the NIH, the National Down Syndrome Organization, so I know the members of NDSS and leaders there. I am a member of the National Institute of Health-led Down Syndrome Research Consortium. Okay, I was in Washington the end of September for our first general meeting. So the research consortium really reflects the fact that the government is getting behind, and they're actually directed by laws now, is getting behind organizing the research around Down syndrome so that it's done effectively and efficiently, that kind of a thing. So I'm a member, we're very engaged there. Its first task, and I'll talk about it, is building a contact registry to support clinicals that are actually started, and will be, others will be coming along. And then obviously advocate with local organizations. I would love to, with every Down Syndrome Association I meet here in Madison, I'm in Indianapolis on Thursday, I was in Charlotte on Saturday. I would love to have every one of them put a line item in their budget that says we're going to direct X% of our revenues a year to research. Okay, that's my hope. I left the Charlotte group, and they actually said, Bob, we're going to do a fund run. So that's why I left these little flyers here, you know. And I'll talk about that as a fundraising platform. But I felt good that that group, I convinced them upon presenting to them that they really want to make this part of their mission. Okay. Everything else that the groups do, advocating for education and employment, all very, very critical. Awareness with the physicians, all that kind of, really, really critical. Let's add this as well, though. All right. So I talked about this as recently as 2004. There were no defined biological mechanisms to sort of point you to where the sources of the cognitive difficulties were. And no potential drug targets were available for study. Now, since that time, and we're only talking 7 years here, okay, which is really a short time in terms of medical research, primarily through privately generated funds, some NIH help, really some fantastic progress has been made. And now there are multiple independent studies that are identifying the promise for improving cognition in individuals with Down syndrome, okay? Pathways that are contributing to the origins of difficulties. I still remind everybody that funding for Down syndrome research is underfunded, okay? We kind of break this out with a number of conditions here, bringing cystic fibrosis all the way down the list. You can read them. And this is NIH dollars per capita, okay? And you see what's down at the bottom of the list. So this is NIH research dollars per capita, and you look at Huntington's, Fragile X, go through the list, and some of it's to a degree driven by the size of the population, but the facts are per capita spending for Down syndrome alone. NIH realizes that. They don't like it. A couple years ago, they bumped it up about 10 to 15%, which was really encouraging. Okay, they said, look at what we're doing. We were all happy, but now we're in a budget crunch again, right? In Washington, we're all feeling that, and if it can stay flat for the next year, that would be great. But I don't see that happening. Everybody's going to suffer a little bit. again, speaking to the ports, we're not going to be able to rely on the NIH to cover all of the funding area. And that $55 million, by the way, is not just, obviously, not directed specifically to Down syndrome cognitive research. It's very important research, but we're carving out this piece that we feel is very critical, and they support, to a degree, some of that research, but it would be greater if it was better.
So how do they explain that funding?
You know what they say, and not to get into a lot of the detail, but Yvonne Maddox, who's the director with which that funding comes through, she'll say, hey, if we had good grant applications come through, they would be funded. All right. Now, once you start that discussion, you sit around a table with scientists and you get back and forth about what's valid or not, what's good science to support or not. So that's the stock answer that she gives. She gave that same answer when I was in Dallas at the DSAIA conference, you know, back February or something like that. She was asked that same question, and that's her short response.
So what is the interest of scientists in Down syndrome?
It's growing. To participate in the research.
Let's say between Huntington's or Parkinson's and Down syndrome.
Well, you know,
how do scientists view that?
Well, you know, being a scientist, and back when I was a postdoc and I was relying on federal grants and things, to a degree, you follow the money. Okay, you're trying to create a career for yourself, so your research, you may have an interest, but it might kind of go on a detour because you weren't funded there, so you end up with Parkinson's or something like that. I hope I'm answering your question. That, to a degree, has created what you might call a paucity of potential grant applications to the NIH. All right, but with the research that's been recently demonstrated on the origins, these pathways I'll describe, I think that interest is picking up. Number one. Secondly, what the NIH has realized is that they need to incent younger researchers to start out their career in this area. Okay, so they are great on identifying grants specifically for young researchers to try to push them into Down syndrome.
I have two quick questions. I don't want to derail you too much, but when that says per capita, is that per person affected by that syndrome condition?
Right.
On the per cap, so it's per,
yeah, so you
not
take
per
NIH,
citazen or taxpayer.
No, you do it.
So it's proportional to the incident.
Right. So
okay.
The math should be pretty close. Don't I hope the math's close, but you take.
I believe you. I'm not questioning.
The 18 to 20 million. I know you're not. So 18, just to demonstrate how the math works. NIH funds 18 to 20 million for Down syndrome. There's 400,000 persons with Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. And then, what is the role of the USEDS in incentivizing the researchers or the young folks as part of their mission?
What? I'm sorry. What is
the University Centers for Excellence, our Weizmann Center?
Oh, well.
like those are the national cancer centers.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for any individual organization, but.
Isn't that part of their mission?
Well, yeah.
Research service?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is. But okay, that's a nice broad statement, isn't it? But you're a 30-year-old postdoc, and you're trying to create a career for yourself, and you're trying to become a tenured professor someplace, and despite what they're trying to do to promote things, it might be that you're just directed someplace else. And I'm making very broad statements here, but that's just the facts.
Because I see that Fragile X influence in
sure.
our Weizmann Center. It's so.
Yeah. Well, you know something, and part of this too, and this is why advocacy is so important. I'm not afraid to say it because I hear it from parents all the time. They say that as a community, parents of children with Down syndrome aren't as loud and vocal as perhaps autism is, as an example. Okay, bounded rationality here, perhaps, right? That it doesn't. Why make a noise about research? It's a trisomic condition. What can be done? But the science you're going to see here will convince you otherwise. That it is something to consider. It is something to advocate within your organization and support. Okay. Our process, by the way, so we take funds and then get them back out to where the research is being done. I get some emails now and then. Well, what are you researching lately, Bob? And I said, I'm not researching anything. Okay. So, but we take the funds. We have a scientific advisory board, which I'll describe in a little bit, of really world-renowned scientists who review grant applications, then make recommendations for where our research dollars go. We share that scientific advisory board with Down Syndrome Research and Treatment Foundation. Okay, that's how close